Victor Harrington's commanding presence in Manhattan's cutthroat real estate world stands in stark contrast to his profound vulnerability as a single father desperate for companionship. He built a billion-dollar empire from nothing, transforming abandoned industrial sites into gleaming commercial developments, commanding boardrooms filled with executives twice his age, and negotiating deals that made headlines in the Wall Street Journal. Yet in his penthouse nursery, watching his 9-month-old son babble innocently in his crib, Victor feels more powerless than he ever has in any high-stakes negotiation. It begins with a flicker of calculation in Clarissa Monroe's eyes whenever she looks at the baby. A cold assessment rather than maternal warmth. It vanishes so quickly Victor questions his own perception and convinces himself he imagined it. Until his head of security pulls him aside. Marcus Chen, an ex-FBI behavioral analyst who has protected Victor for 8 years, speaks quietly but firmly. "Boss, I've profiled terrorists and serial killers. That woman looks at your kid like he's an obstacle to be managed, not a child to be loved." Victor stands on the edge of signing a prenuptial agreement that includes guardianship provisions, placing his son's entire childhood, perhaps his entire life, in Clarissa's hands. Behind her practiced smiles, there may be nothing but cold ambition. If Victor's instincts are wrong, he will destroy a relationship with a good woman and condemn himself to continued loneliness. But if his instincts are right and he ignores them, his son will grow up emotionally abandoned by the very stepmother Victor chose, sent away to boarding schools, kept out of sight, raised by hired strangers while Clarissa enjoys the Harrington fortune and status. Tonight, Victor decides to find out the truth. Inside his own nursery, he will fake a heart attack. And in that moment of manufactured crisis, he will discover whether Clarissa Monroe is the devoted partner she claims to be, or the calculating predator his gut tells him she truly is. Victor Harrington had built his empire on instinct and calculated risk. 20 years ago, he'd borrowed against everything he owned to purchase a crumbling warehouse in Brooklyn that everyone said was worthless. Today, that property anchored a portfolio worth $3 billion. He could walk into any boardroom in Manhattan and command immediate respect. Yet standing in his penthouse at midnight, staring at the sleeping form of his 9-month-old son, Victor felt more uncertain than he had facing down hostile takeovers or bankruptcy threats. The divorce had been brutal. Melissa had left him for a Monaco-based playboy, walking away from their marriage the moment the pregnancy test showed positive. She'd signed away all parental rights for a 7-figure settlement, disappearing to the French Riviera without ever holding their son. Victor had named the boy James, after his own father, and discovered a love so fierce it terrified him. Which was why Clarissa Monroe should have been perfect. She was 35, educated at Vassar, connected to old money families that opened doors even Victor's billions couldn't. She said all the right things about family and partnership. She smiled for the photographers when they attended charity galas. She looked like everything a man in his position should want. But there was something wrong. Something Victor couldn't quite name. "Boss, we need to talk." Marcus Chen appeared in the doorway, his ex-FBI instincts always sensing when Victor needed him. "About Ms. Monroe." Victor turned from the window. "Go ahead. I've been watching her for 3 months now. The way she looks at James when she thinks no one's paying attention." Marcus hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I've profiled dangerous people my entire career. She watches that baby like he's a problem to be solved, not a child to be loved." The words hit Victor like a physical blow because they confirmed what his gut had been screaming for weeks. "You're sure? Sure enough that I think you need to test her before you sign that prenup." Marcus crossed his arms. "Because once you give her guardianship rights, if something happens to you, that boy is hers to do with as she pleases. And I don't think she plans to keep him close." Victor looked back at his sleeping son, and the decision crystallized. "Then we test her. I want to know exactly who Clarissa Monroe really is." The next morning, Victor positioned himself in his home office with a clear view of the nursery across the hall. He'd told both women he had conference calls all day and wouldn't be available. What he really wanted was to observe them when they thought he wasn't watching. Clarissa arrived at 9, dressed in cream Chanel, her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect chignon. She entered the nursery where Grace was feeding James his bottle, and Victor watched the transformation. Clarissa's smile appeared instantly, practiced and radiant. "Good morning, little man," she cooed, bending down to stroke James's cheek. But her eyes remained cold, calculating. When James reached for her, she stepped back smoothly. "Oh, sweetie, you'll get formula on my jacket." Grace, dressed in simple black pants and a white blouse, immediately shifted the baby away. "I'll keep him clear, Ms. Monroe." "Thank you, Grace." Clarissa's tone was pleasant but dismissive. She pulled out her phone and began scrolling. "Victor wants photos for the engagement announcement. Hold him up properly." Grace positioned James, and Clarissa posed beside them, her smile magazine perfect. The second the photo was taken, she stepped away and returned to her phone. James began fussing, and Victor saw Clarissa's jaw tighten in irritation before she masked it with concern. "Is he always this noisy?" "He's teething, ma'am," Grace said quietly. "It's painful for him." Clarissa checked her watch. "I have lunch at Le Bernardin. Call me if Victor needs me." She left without looking at James again. The baby began crying in earnest, and Grace's entire demeanor transformed. She gathered him against her shoulder, swaying gently, humming a soft melody Victor recognized as a Colombian lullaby. "Shoo, mi angelito," she whispered. "I know it hurts. Mama Grace is here." She knew exactly how to hold him, the precise rhythm of rocking that soothed him. Within minutes, James quieted, his small hand gripping her collar as he buried his face in her neck. Victor felt something crack in his chest. Grace wasn't performing. She wasn't tolerating his son or managing him. She loved him. Victor met Marcus and Dr. Alastair Chen in his private study Wednesday evening after Clarissa had left for a society dinner. Alastair was Victor's personal physician for 15 years, a man who'd seen him through stress-induced hypertension and the emotional collapse after the divorce. "You're asking me to help you fake a cardiac event," Alastair said slowly, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Victor, this is necessary." Victor leaned forward. "That prenup I'm signing Monday gives Clarissa guardianship provisions. If I die or become incapacitated, she gets primary custody of James. I need to know if she'd actually care for him or see him as an inconvenience." Alastair exchanged glances with Marcus. "What exactly are you proposing?" Marcus pulled up blueprints on his tablet. "We install microcameras in the nursery, for angles, complete audio coverage. Friday evening, Victor collapses in front of Clarissa and Grace. We observe how each woman responds. Does Clarissa call for help? Does she protect James? Or does she reveal her true priorities? You'll need to fake unconsciousness convincingly, Alastair said, his medical mind already working through the scenario. Shallow breathing, no visible eye movement under closed lids, complete muscle relaxation. Any sign you're conscious will compromise the test. Can you coach me through it? Yes. But Victor, if Clarissa actually is dangerous, putting yourself in a vulnerable position. That's why I'll be there, Marcus interrupted. Hidden monitoring room, instant communication with Victor via earpiece. Anything goes wrong, I can be in that nursery in 8 seconds. Victor looked at both men. The prenup signing is Monday morning at 10. I need to know by Sunday who Clarissa really is. Can we do this Friday night? Alastair was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. Friday night. But I want full medical monitoring on you. Heart rate, blood pressure. I'll be with Marcus watching everything. Agreed. Victor felt the weight of what he was about to do, but the image of Grace rocking James, whispering, "Mi angelito," solidified his resolve. Let's find out if I'm about to marry a monster. Friday evening descended on the penthouse with the weight of approaching judgment. Victor had dismissed his security team at 6, claiming he wanted a quiet family evening. Only Marcus remained, hidden in the monitoring room Victor had installed behind a false panel in the master bedroom, watching 4 camera feeds from the nursery. Clarissa arrived at 7, stunning in a red silk blouse and tailored black pants. She kissed Victor's cheek, her perfume expensive and cold. "Darling, this prenup review is so tedious. Promise me we can actually enjoy being engaged once Monday is behind us." "I promise," Victor said, the lie bitter on his tongue. In the nursery, Grace was preparing James for bed, her gentle humming drifting through the apartment. They had dinner, and Clarissa talked about the wedding she was planning, a destination ceremony in Tuscany, followed by a honeymoon in the Maldives. "We'll leave James with Grace, of course," she said breezily. 3 weeks is too long for a baby to travel internationally. 3 weeks without seeing his son. Victor felt sick. At 8:30, James began crying. Grace's voice came softly through the monitor, "It's okay, Bibi. Just a little gas." But the crying continued, escalating to the wails of an uncomfortable infant. "I should check on him," Victor said, standing. Clarissa waved her hand dismissively. "Grace has it handled. She's paid to handle it." Victor ignored her, walking toward the nursery. The microcameras were live. Marcus was watching. This was it. He entered the nursery as Grace lifted James from the crib, concern on her face. Victor clutched his chest, gasping. "Grace," he let his knees buckle, collapsing to the floor beside the crib. James's cries intensified. "Mr. Harrington." Grace's voice was pure panic. She laid James back in the crib and dropped to her knees beside Victor, checking his pulse at his neck with trembling fingers. "Oh God, oh God. Mr. Harrington, can you hear me?" Victor kept his breathing shallow, his muscles completely relaxed as Alistair had taught him. Through barely parted eyelids, he saw Grace fumble for her phone with shaking hands. Then Clarissa appeared in the doorway. And she was smiling. Clarissa stood in the nursery doorway, and the expression on her face turned Victor's blood to ice. It wasn't panic. It wasn't fear. It was barely concealed satisfaction, quickly masked but not before Grace looked up and saw it too. "Ms. Monroe." Grace's voice cracked with terror and desperation. "Call 911. I think he's having a heart attack." Clarissa walked into the room slowly, her heels clicking against the hardwood. "Wait." Her voice was calm, measured. "Let's think about this carefully." Grace stared at her in disbelief. "Think about, he needs an ambulance. Now." Her fingers moved to dial. Clarissa's hand shot out, gripping Grace's wrist with surprising strength. "I said wait." Her eyes were cold, calculating. "Put the phone down. He could be dying." Grace tried to pull free, but Clarissa's manicured nails dug into her skin. "Yes." Clarissa's voice dropped to barely a whisper, intimate and venomous. "Do you know how much easier this would be if he just went?" She glanced at Victor's motionless form, and Victor felt bile rise in his throat. No custody battles. No stepson complications. No split attention. Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Just me and the money. Me and the empire. Me and the social position I've worked toward my entire life." Grace's face registered pure horror. "You're insane." "I'm practical." Clarissa tightened her grip on Grace's wrist. "Victor's had high blood pressure for years. Everyone knows it. A heart attack at his age, given his stress levels. Tragic but not suspicious. The prenup is signed Monday. If he makes it to Monday." She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "But if something happens before then, well, I'm still the grieving fiancée. Still the woman who comforted his orphaned son. And without guardianship provisions to complicate things, I can ensure that child is taken care of, somewhere far away from me." James was screaming now, his cries piercing and desperate, as if he could sense the evil in the room. Clarissa didn't even glance at him. "You're talking about letting him die," Grace whispered, tears streaming down her face. "About sending away a baby whose only crime is existing. You're a monster." Clarissa's expression hardened. "I'm a woman who knows what she wants. And what I want is Victor's money and status, not his baggage." She leaned closer to Grace. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to put that phone down, and we're going to wait exactly 10 minutes before calling anyone. Just to be sure." Grace's eyes blazed through her tears. "No." Grace wrenched her arm free from Clarissa's grip with a strength born of pure desperation and fury. She lunged for her phone, but Clarissa was faster, kicking it across the room where it skidded under the changing table. "You stupid girl," Clarissa hissed. "Do you have any idea what I can do to you?" She advanced on Grace, who was now positioned protectively between Clarissa and both Victor's body and the screaming baby. "You're here on a work visa, aren't you? One call to immigration and you're deported. Sent back to Colombia with nothing. No references, no money, no future." Grace's hands were shaking, but she stood her ground. "I don't care." "You should." Clarissa's voice was venomous. "I'll make sure you never work in this country again. I'll blacklist you with every agency in New York. You'll be unemployable, unhirable, forgotten. All because you couldn't mind your place." "My place?" Grace's voice cracked, but there was steel beneath the tears. "My place is protecting that baby. My place is saving the man who's been nothing but kind to me. My place is being a human being with a conscience." She moved toward where her phone lay under the table. Clarissa grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around. "I'm warning you. Fire me." Grace shouted, no longer caring about decorum or consequences. "Deport me. Ruin me. Destroy my entire life. I don't care anymore." Tears streamed down her face as she shoved Clarissa back. "That baby needs his father. That baby deserves to grow up loved and wanted, not shipped away because you're too selfish to see him as anything but an obstacle." She dropped to her knees beside Victor, placing her hands on his chest the way she'd seen on television medical dramas. "I'm calling 911 right now, and if you try to stop me again, I swear to God I'll scream until the neighbors call the police themselves." Clarissa's face twisted with rage. "You're finished. You hear me? Finished." But Grace was no longer listening. She began chest compressions, her technique clumsy but desperate, counting aloud through her tears. 1, 2, 3, 4, somebody help. Please, God, please let him be okay." Clarissa, disgusted by the display and annoyed by James's escalating screams, walked to the crib and picked up the baby roughly, holding him away from her body like a distasteful object. "Shut up," she muttered at the wailing infant. "Just shut up for once in your miserable existence." James screamed louder, his face red, his tiny fists flailing. And Grace, still pumping Victor's chest, looked up at Clarissa holding that baby with such callous contempt and felt her heart break completely. "Give him to me," Grace demanded. "I don't think so." Clarissa's smile was cruel. "You're busy playing hero. I'm just keeping the brat quiet." That was the moment Victor decided the test had gone far enough. Victor's eyes snapped open. He sat up in one fluid motion, his voice cutting through the chaos like ice. "That's enough." Clarissa froze, her perfectly composed mask shattering into fragments of shock and confusion. James was still in her arms, his screams now hiccuping sobs. Grace fell backward, gasping, her hands still outstretched from where she'd been performing compressions. "Victor?" Clarissa's voice was small, uncertain, as she tried to process what was happening. You're awake. But I thought. You thought I was dying." Victor stood slowly, his movements deliberate, controlled. His eyes never left Clarissa's face. You hoped I was dying. He walked toward her, and she instinctively stepped back. Give me my son. Her hands trembled as she extended James toward him. Victor took the baby with infinite gentleness, cradling him against his chest. James's cries began to quiet immediately, his small hand gripping his father's shirt. Victor's other hand moved to his pocket, pulling out his phone. Victor, I can explain, Clarissa started, her voice rising with panic. Explain what? Victor tapped his phone screen, and suddenly Clarissa's own voice filled the room. Do you know how much easier this would be if he just went? No custody battles, no stepson complications. Just me and the money. The color drained from Clarissa's face. Victor gestured around the nursery with his free hand. 4 cameras. 4 different angles. Complete audio coverage. He looked at her with absolute contempt. Every word. Every action. All recorded. You set me up. Clarissa's shock was transforming into fury. You faked this. You. I tested you. Victor's voice was ice. And you failed spectacularly. He pulled up another clip, this one showing Clarissa roughly handling James while saying, "Shut up for once in your miserable existence. That's my 9-month-old son you're calling miserable. The child you claimed you wanted to raise as your own." Clarissa's eyes darted to the cameras, to Grace still kneeling on the floor, to the phone in Victor's hand. Her expression cycled through shock, rage, fear, and finally settled on calculation. This won't hold up anywhere. You entrapped me. Any lawyer would. I have the best lawyers in New York on retainer. Victor's smile was arctic. And they've already reviewed the footage. You prevented emergency services from being called for a man you believed was having a cardiac event. You admitted to planning to remove my son from his home. You threatened a woman for trying to save my life. He stepped closer. How do you think that plays in court, Clarissa? How do you think that plays in the press? Her face crumbled. Clarissa's composure was unraveling in real time. I was in shock, she stammered, her voice taking on a desperate quality. People say things they don't mean when they're traumatized. Any reasonable person would understand. You smiled when you thought I was dying. Victor's voice was flat, factual. That's on camera too. She changed tactics instantly, her expression hardening. You think you can destroy me? My father is managing partner at Whitmore and Associates. We have connections to every major firm on the East Coast. If you release that footage, I'll bury you in litigation for the next decade. Defamation, emotional distress, unlawful surveillance. Your father's firm doesn't scare me. Victor shifted James to his shoulder, patting the baby's back rhythmically. And I've already consulted with my own attorneys. The cameras are in my private residence, clearly disclosed in the employment agreements both you and Grace signed. The footage shows you committing what could arguably be attempted negligent homicide by preventing emergency services from being contacted. Clarissa's breath came faster. You wouldn't dare make this public. The scandal would touch you too. Your reputation, your business relationships. I don't care. Victor's words were simple, final. You threatened my son. Nothing else matters. The door opened, and Marcus entered with 2 security guards, both former military, both imposing. Clarissa's eyes went wide. Ms. Monroe, Marcus said formally, you need to leave the premises immediately. Your personal belongings will be packed and delivered to your apartment tomorrow. You can't throw me out like trash. Clarissa's voice rose to a near shriek. We're engaged. I have rights. Victor pulled the engagement ring box from his pocket, the 5-carat diamond he'd purchased 2 months ago, and set it on the changing table. No, you don't. The engagement is terminated. The prenup will never be signed. And if you ever attempt to contact me or my son again, I'll release every second of footage to the media and let the court of public opinion do what it will with you. Clarissa looked around wildly, searching for an ally, a weapon, any leverage. Her eyes landed on Grace, still sitting on the floor, tears streaming down her face. "This is your fault," Clarissa spat. "You and your pathetic maternal act. You think he'll choose the help over me? You're nothing. You're nobody. She's the woman who was willing to sacrifice everything to save my life and protect my son," Victor said quietly. "Which makes her worth 1,000 of you." Marcus gestured to the door. "Ma'am, please don't make this difficult." Clarissa drew herself up, grasping at the shreds of her dignity. "This isn't over, Victor. My family doesn't forget. Neither do I." Victor met her eyes. "And I have cameras, witnesses, and a team of attorneys who live for cases like this. Test me, Clarissa. Please, test me." The guards moved to flank her, and Clarissa finally understood she'd lost. She walked toward the door, but paused at the threshold to deliver one final venomous shot. "That baby is a mistake. His mother didn't want him, and neither did you until you needed a sympathy story. You're just as much of a fraud as. Get out." Victor's voice was steel. "Now." Marcus physically escorted her out, her protests and threats echoing down the hallway until the penthouse door slammed shut, and finally, there was silence. Alone in the nursery, Victor stood motionless for a long moment, James now quiet against his shoulder. Grace remained on the floor, her hands still trembling, her face wet with tears. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was draining away, leaving her hollow and shaking. "Grace." Victor's voice was gentle. "Look at me." She raised her eyes, expecting anger or disappointment or dismissal. Instead, she saw something that looked like remorse. "I'm sorry." Victor lowered himself to sit on the floor beside her, still holding James. "I'm so sorry I put you through that. What I did, testing Clarissa that way, I never anticipated she'd be that cruel to you. The threats, the things she said. You needed to know." Grace's voice was hoarse from crying and shouting. "You needed to protect him." She looked at James, who was now drowsing against his father's chest. "I would do it again. 1,000 times, I would do it again." Victor was quiet for a moment, studying her. "Why? Why?" Grace's laugh was watery, disbelieving. "Because I love him." The words tumbled out, unplanned and raw. "I know I'm just the nanny. I know I'm nobody important. But I love that baby like he's my own. Every morning when he smiles at me, every night when I rock him to sleep, he's mine in my heart, even if he's not really mine at all." Victor's throat tightened. "Grace, I need to tell you something." He shifted James slightly, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. "After Clarissa left, I met with my attorneys about more than just the footage. I met with them about this." He handed her the envelope. Grace opened it with shaking hands, her eyes scanning the legal letterhead, the dense paragraphs, the official language. Her breath caught. "That's paperwork naming you as James's legal guardian should anything happen to me," Victor explained quietly. "Full adoption rights. Medical decision-making authority. Financial security for both of you. Everything a mother should have." Grace's tears began again, but different now, not from fear or pain, but from overwhelming emotion. "Mr. Harrington, I can't, this is too much." "Victor," he corrected gently. "And it's not too much. It's what should have been obvious from the start." He reached out, taking her hand. "You're not just the nanny anymore, Grace. You haven't been for months. You're his mother in every way that matters. You love him, you protect him, you put his needs above your own safety and security. That's what a mother does." "But I'm nobody," Grace whispered. "I'm just." "You're the woman who was willing to be deported, blacklisted, and destroyed to save my life and protect my son," Victor interrupted. "You're the woman who fought a woman twice your size and with 100 times your resources because you knew it was right. You're the woman my son reaches for in the middle of the night, the one whose voice calms him when he's scared. His own voice roughened with emotion. You're exactly who James needs. Who we both need. Grace looked down at the papers, then at James sleeping peacefully against his father's chest, then back at Victor. Are you asking? I'm asking if you'll accept. Victor's eyes were bright. I'm asking if you'll be his mother, legally and officially. I'm asking if you'll be family. Grace's answer came through tears and laughter mixed together. Yes. God, yes. Of course yes. Victor smiled, the first genuine smile Grace had seen from him in months. He stood, helping Grace to her feet, and together they looked down at James, who chose that moment to open his eyes and grin up at both of them with his two tiny bottom teeth showing. Mama Grace, Victor said softly, and the title felt right in a way nothing with Clarissa ever had. Grace leaned her head against Victor's shoulder, her hand resting on James's back, and felt something settle in her chest, something that felt like safety, like permanence, like home. Outside, Manhattan's lights continued their eternal dance. But inside the penthouse nursery, a family that had been forged in deception and revealed in fire finally found their truth. Not in blood or marriage or social standing, but in the fierce, unbreakable bond of choosing each other, choosing love over convenience, courage over comfort, and the messy, complicated beauty of real family over the polished lie of a perfect one. Grace Thompson, who had arrived in America with nothing but hope and determination, who had worked thankless jobs and sent money home to her mother in Bogota, who had dreamed of a better life without daring to dream too big, stood in a billionaire's nursery holding adoption papers and realized that sometimes, the family you need finds you in the most unexpected ways. And Victor Harrington, who had built an empire on calculated risks, finally understood that the most important investment he'd ever make had nothing to do with real estate or profit margins. It was standing beside him in a simple white blouse, humming a Colombian lullaby to his son, and calling them both home.